Hello, and welcome to Tarot and Attachment. My name is Erin Smith, and I am a professional tarot reader and an associate marriage and family therapist. And as always, there's a lot going on in the world. So I thought I would take this opportunity to consult the cards and get some insight on how we might best navigate these turbulent waters and be skillful doing it. So I'm just going to throw a general spread and ask for insider guidance on what would be helpful for us to know, understand, or do in order to align with our highest good at this time. And let's see what themes come up. So I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to go silent and concentrate while I shuffle, and I will be with you momentarily. I'm going to say a prayer over these cards. Wow. It's a lot of major arcana, which is just fascinating, right? When you're pulling a spread that has a limited number of cards in it, when it is inordinately skewed towards major arcana, it's a kind of loud, pronounced message from the universe that are talking about like bigger themes regarding our soul's purpose. So I think really the message here is about kind of tapping in or connecting to these deeper inner themes and not getting so caught up in what's going on out in the material world on a day-to-day basis. That if we can stay connected to these bigger movements of time and understand, well, it's painting a picture. So The world, or I'm sorry, the Wheel of Fortune is there to remind us that everything happens in seasons and cycles. It is really representative of these bigger movements or cycles of time. And, you can think of this as happening over the course of an individual human life, that each season of life is sort of colored by a different, generally it's colored by a different focus. When you're a child, you're learning things. You're learning about yourself. You're learning about the world. You're learning what you like and don't like. And you're discovering that through the act of play. And you are, freed from the responsibilities of life because you're just growing and changing. And so you really get to discover things about yourself. I mean, ideally, right? It's not always the case for everyone. Sometimes childhood is marked by deep pain. But generally speaking, it is a time of growth where we are developing a sense of self and discovering where we fit into the overall scheme of things out in the world. What differentiates me from others? And how do I need to be? How do I need to adjust my behavior in order to fit in with groups? Um, that's childhood. And then, adolescence is a time of discovering one's sexuality and rebelling against the status quo, and certainly rebelling against one's family of origin in order to discover what your internal values are that are authentically reflective of your unique perspective. And, finding people who feel like-minded in that regard and, taking risks. Risk taking is very much a part of adolescence. And of course, then you move into, young adulthood. And oftentimes that's marked by um, discovering what it is that you want to do professionally, how to provide for yourself materially. It is often the time when people find partners and think about having children. Again, what you're seeing is that there's a distinct way that we are in these different seasons of life. And this will constantly be playing out over the course of a lifetime. Well, the same is true over, long stretches of human history. How do we come together and formulate societies around mutual beliefs? How do we express those beliefs? How do we structure laws and rules around who we love and how we work and how we govern? And, these movements change over time, prior to about 2000 years ago, it was a lot more common to find matrilineal societies and to have, to worship goddesses instead of having it be this very, paternalistic expression of beliefs. And, in terms of the father god instead of the mother earth, and the expression of fertility through movements in nature that was just very much assigned to the feminine. And now you might even imagine that we are starting to see the limitations of having this patrilineal this paternalistic view of the world, and really starting to come back into a time where we need to explore and express a greater affinity for the feminine. These are larger cycles that we're moving through, and really The Wheel of Fortune is there to remind us that the great constant in life is change, that we are constantly moving from one phase into another, one state of being into another. Youth gives way to age. Um, all living beings have a life cycle. All times of the year move from one season to the next. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is certain. That there's an evolution to these movements. And so we're being asked to look at these patterns, to notice where we're at now in our personal lives, and then also maybe collectively as a society, to look at maybe where we've been, to contemplate what the next phase might look like, and to align with it, but also to hold in our mind's eye ideals of what we might want to move towards. Again, this idea of like, if we are out of balance and we are skewed towards this masculine energy, and I'm going to look at this archetypally through a Hermetic lens or Hellenistic lens. So I'm not associating the masculine with men necessarily. It is a quality of energy. Masculine archetype is an externalization of will. It is taking action in the external world, asserting your intention and making something happen, affecting some cause onto the world through taking that action. The feminine energy is a lot more assigned to an internal process. So you can think of something like meditation as being associated with the feminine, being internally still and reflective of what's going on experientially inside of ourselves. You can think of it as a seed that is laying dormant in the earth, waiting for just the right conditions to germinate and then to express itself externally in the world. Or similarly, you can think of it as when a mother receives the seed and her egg is fertilized, she is holding space for this little being to grow, to develop. And there's all this energy that happens below the level of the scene before that child is externally projected into the world. You can think of it as meditating on an idea that is just an undeveloped seed of an idea, and you meditate it and turn it around in your mind's eye, and you vision it in greater complexity before it can be fully formed out in the world, taking action in order to materialize that visualization. So you're also getting a sense from how I'm speaking about this of how these archetypes dovetail. So they're inextricably linked. Even though they're different expressions, they work together in order to create anything. Creation itself is this combination of masculine and feminine energies. And ultimately, what Spirit is asking from us is to think about how we might live in greater balance between these two different archetypal forces. That is really what Temperance is pointing to. Temperance is the alchemist card. And so the idea of alchemy is this combining elements distilling them and bringing them together in such a way that they create a kind of transcendent form. So, you know, the literal representation of alchemy, or at least, the precursor to chemistry, was combining base elements and distilling them in such a way in order to create gold. But even this is really like serving as a metaphor for how we can I, separate and identify these different parts of ourselves. Notice the impurities, notice where they have been maligned by defense mechanisms, and really distilling out those different parts and then being able to recombine them in a way that allows us to transcend these challenges, or, blockages, I think is a better word, that we all kind of bump up against in our lives. Again, it's this idea of coming together in a perfectly balanced way in order to have a kind of enlightened experience out in the world. And so, and this happens, we become cognizant of this through conscious awareness of noticing what the outcome of certain choices has been. And that's really what we're being asked to look at here with justice. Justice is the karma card. And karma is just an acknowledgement that we live in a cause and effect universe. So when you are noticing a certain outcome in your life, you can be certain that it is the result of choices that have been made that have brought you to this point. So, for instance, if you're graduating from college, that doesn't just spontaneously arise for no reason. It's the culmination of all the work that you put in, the energy and effort and consistency of showing up at an institution and availing yourself of the wisdom of your teachers and writing papers and all of that. All of those choices that you made gave rise to that effect of being able to graduate. And really, you can think of every aspect of your life as being that. Sometimes it's a lot harder to determine what actions led up to an event. And, believe me, karma is complex because it isn't all parsed out and neatly divided into these categories. Here's my karma and here's your karma, because there's also like, an interdependency of systems, But for instance, so in, karma's complex too. There's more than one factor involved when you're giving rise to certain outcomes. However, when you look around and you look at where we find ourselves right now politically, you can be certain that it didn't come out of nowhere. It is the culmination of choices that have been made over an extended period of time. For instance, ignoring the working class and catering only to the whims and desires of people who are moneyed. That has created a certain kind of uh, income inequality in our country. And again, that that effect is the result of choices that have been made. And so we're being asked to look at these bigger cycles, to analyze what choices we've made in our own personal lives, what choices we've made collectively as a society, to notice what the outcome has been. Has that been beneficial? Has it caused harm? And then if indeed we are seeing some discordance, then to ask, how might we come into greater balance? If things are out of balance, what energy, equal and opposite, needs to be implied to right the ship, so to speak? and that this is where we're at in this cycle of time. And in order to do this, in order to be objective or mindful about what it is that we're looking at, because remember, when we are deeply emotionally activated by things that are going on, there is a tendency to not be able to see things so clearly. And that's where strength comes in. So, strength is about taming the beast within. It is mastering our minds so that our minds don't master us. And it really is this ability to disidentify from our thoughts as though they are us, right? It is a recognition that I think all kinds of things every second of every day. In fact, I'm very likely, well, I'm certainly not conscious of every thought that comes across the screen of my own mind. But if I am to become more mindful and more consciously aware and identify as the witness, the consciousness that is tracking these different narratives that are going on in mental talk space, then I have a greater chance of being able to practice discernment with my thoughts. That if I am noticing the narratives and I'm noticing what thoughts give rise to what emotional or give rise to the emotional sensations that I'm also experiencing in my body, and I notice how these two sense spaces are talking to one another, and one thought is connected to thoughts and beliefs that came before. And again, this being mindful, getting into a practice of watching and noticing in a somewhat dispassionate place, right? It's not saying that I'm disassociative. It's saying that I am holding the perspective of the witness in order to notice the big feelings and get curious about the quality of sensation. Oh, there's a kind of tightness in my chest or a churning in my belly and a kind of squeezing of the musculature and a kind of vibratory sensation that comes along with this anxious narrative about something. And I'm just noticing how all of that is occurring simultaneously from a kind of centered perspective of the observer. And from that place, I can choose, well, is this narrative that I'm spinning, is it based in any kind of truth? Is it something that I need to take action about, or am I projecting these worries into the future? I'm worried about something that hasn't happened yet and may never happen. Or am I ruminating on things that have gone on in the past and not allowed to come into the present and make choices that are much more centered around what's happening in my life now? This is the way that I practice discernment, and I build the muscle of concentration to stay focused on things that would be more helpful for me to stay concentrated on, or instead of getting pulled into this kind of catastrophic thinking. There's just a greater opportunity for me to show up in the world and sort of take action based on the present moment. Again, pages represent new beginnings, new understandings, a new perspective, a new way of doing things, new people. It is really indicative of the beginning phase of life. It's sort of associated with a childlike wonder, which sometimes is a really great way of navigating the world. If you are confronted with a situation that feels sort of overwhelming and you find yourself getting lost endlessly in this sort of morass of what do I need to do? How do I approach this? Sometimes it helps just to come into the present moment and take things one step at a time and being very open and curious to a discovery of what feels most life affirming in this moment. And of course, each action that we take that's centered in the present moment, that is open and curious, that is in service of vitality, then of course all those actions culminate into bigger outcomes. And, hopefully, if we're noticing each step that's taken where we might be slightly off course, and we're curious and aware enough to sort of course correct, then it is possible for us to come into greater balance within our own lives. And if we are doing this individually, then we can also do it as we come together to form collective societies. So, it's just really important to recognize the perspective that we hold has an effect on the actions that we take. And so we want to make sure that we are seeing things clearly. And again, some of the way we do that is through bearing witness, the Seven of Wands is an interesting card. It's indicative of not showing up in our present as though it's our past. It's suggesting that we have overcome significant challenges to get to where we're at in life. And I'm sure, that certainly accurately describes my own personal situation. In fact, on Friday, I observed 26 years of sobriety. It's another major milestone that is acknowledging a changed life. My life looked really different before I got sober. There were significant challenges, physically, emotionally, and so this is absolutely indicative of that, that I have overcome a lot to get to where I'm at in life. Things haven't been easy. And I had to be strong and resilient, something of a warrior, to not lay down and die, give in to those destructive forces, both my own self-destructive tendencies and, even from early childhood, these big, overwhelming forces that felt domineering and dangerous. I had to be strong in the face of that energy. And yet, what the Seven of Wands wants us to know is that, or really wants us to tune into or find in our own experience, is that everything doesn't have to be this intense battle. That if we can acknowledge that we aren't where we once were, and that maybe we have found a way to create some stability or some kind of safe base in our own lives, then we are a lot more, it's a lot more likely that we're going to be able to take wise action in the present moment. If we're constantly just responding to the chaos around us and we can't find any kind of grounded center, it makes it really hard to build new structures that are, again, more solid, more of an equilibrium. And so the Seven of Wands is just saying, like, don't mistake your present for your past. Acknowledge where progress has been made and continue to plant yourself in that progress, in that stability, no matter how minute it might be. It is necessary for you to put down the weapons, to notice where it's no longer necessary to be in fight or flight all the time. And that if you can actually come into a state of equilibrium within your central nervous system, that it's just so much easier to take right action. The Knight of Swords is just saying, don't overthink it. Take some action based on this desire to find balance within ourselves, within the world around us, to orient ourselves towards new opportunities, to welcome in new connections with people, again, that are life affirming, that inspire us to be warm and connected with one another. And again, there's just this emphasis here on authentic self-expression and warmth. I think this is a really important energetic to transmit here, is that the sun is the ultimate giver of life, and it gives us life through the warmth of its rays. Everything is allowed to grow within that warmth. If we didn't have this sun, if we didn't have a relationship to this star, there would be no life on this planet. And so there's this energetic of warm, radiant expression. You know, if we ourselves are to orient our actions towards the sun, we are expressing ourselves from this place of joy, kindness, connection. How can I find this joy, even in, again, minute ways in my own life? You know, even just that experience of stepping outside and feeling the warm sun on your face, that kind of subtle, pleasurable sensation that can permeate even a distressed mindset, when you can just come into that simple experience. How is it that we can show up today and express that kind of authentic warmth and connection to others out in the world? And taking action from that place of recognizing that when we align with that kind of light and that kind of warmth, it attracts people and opportunities to us that allow us to shine more brightly. There's a kind of safety and security that's being expressed through the archetype of the sun. Coming into a sense of ourselves where we feel safe enough to connect. So there's a lot here that we are being asked to consider in terms of motivation for how to move through the world, and reflecting on both where we've come from and where we are now, and setting some intention about what ideals we might like to orient ourselves towards as we move into the next phase. But always with the idea of being conscious of the actions taken in the present moment. I don't know. So that was a lot. I hope this message has been helpful in some way. I hope that you can experience a little of that sunlight of the spirit this week. And I am sending you all much love and many blessings. Take care.